How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk, guys. We have a very interesting topic, very heartfelt. It's a story of tremendous struggle, but just a strength of an individual. And I think this relates to the heart that we have in this profession. And again, without struggle, there's no progress. And definitely through struggles, you learn the importance of what's good in life and what's bad. And we're going to share a tremendous story of courage through a time when most people would be just giving up. And it's going to be the story of Monica Miller. And obviously, I'm going to have a co-host with me today. I'm going to kind of share the venue with her. She may not, well, let me ask her if she understands what the word share is, because she does have a venue. And she has never shared that venue. Oh, I'm sure we all know who it is at this point. It's Connie Alleyne. Connie, how are you? Connie, how are you?
Hello, everyone. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy, as well as podcast host of the Fly Behind the Wall and Conversations with Connie. I'm so looking forward to hearing Monica's story and really just learning from her. If there are any questions, Monica, that you don't feel comfortable with, it's okay to not answer them.
Yeah, and also, by the way, all jokes aside, I always have to, I start with a joke, but also obviously Connie's podcasts are tremendous. They're tremendous. I got a chance to listen to both of them. I believe I just finished up Fly Behind the Wall. There's a lot of great information if you're in this profession. So please, guys, take a chance and watch it. And then one day, comment, say, hey, where's Gangi? That's all. And you can do one of those things too. And real quick, before we go to Miss Miller, before we introduce her, I want to say one thing. I did get a request from one of my viewers for Connie. So Connie, I haven't forgotten. Remember I told you in the vehicle that there was a request, and I thought it was very interesting. It comes from, I'll just use the initials JR. These are two letters we have never heard before on this show. JR is going to know who they are, obviously. But JR realized that your name was Constantine Alleyne. And she thought your name sounded cooler as Alleyne Constantine. So I'm asking you if you could switch your name.
So I wouldn't be, my dad would be very upset if I switched my name to Alleyne Constantine. My dad named me Constantine, and he's very proud of himself having won that battle with my mom.
Okay, so hey guys, I tried. JR, I told you I was going to do it. All right, because now all jokes aside, time to hear a really serious story. But first, let me introduce you to Monica Miller, and then we're going to go to our break. Then we're going to come back, and we are going to go on a tremendous journey, and I believe a journey that we're not going to forget. So Monica, first off, let me just thank you. It takes tremendous courage for you to, first off, come onto a venue like this, share such a personal story. But I know why you do it. I know you do it because you know someone's going to listen and someone's going to learn from it. And it's a matter of if I can get to one. And I think that's what you try to do every time you step up, is you try to get to one, because in the end, one, it's all that matters if I could save one. So do you mind introducing yourself briefly to my audience?
So I'm Monica Miller. I'm a survivor of childhood sex trafficking. I'm also a mother of two, and I also have a craft business. So that's a little me. I'm also a social worker too.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into a lot today. So the reason why the description was a little brief at the beginning is because who she is relates to that story, and I want to really get to that story when we come back from our sponsors. But I got a chance to hear her on a show called Breaking Barriers, and I found that her story just really was a story I wanted to share. Now, again, even though we work in corrections, it's a story about heart. And don't forget, guys, we worked at female facilities, sex trafficking, or even it could happen in male facilities. You don't know. Sex trafficking does happen behind the wall. So it kind of has that relationship. But either way, it has a story of heart, struggle, and then progress at the end. So, who could not relate to a story that touches on the human spirit like we're going to hear today? So now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tear Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. We come back, we're going to introduce you to Monica Miller's story. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, and we are back. So again, Monica, thank you for coming on. Connie, thank you for obviously joining in on this topic. This is actually the second topic that seems to be very tough for us in a row. We just did a story about a female officer that was raped out in Louisiana, and we've actually had a chance to cover that twice. And it takes a lot from even the people that are doing it, because you just don't know what you can ask, what you can't ask. And when people trust you to tell that story, it puts a lot of weight. It humbles you, yes, but it puts a lot of weight because you want to do it right. Same thing here. You want to do it right because there's a lot of people that are going to tune into this and they're going to expect something from it. So the people that really have to prove themselves today is not you, Monica. It's us. So you sit back, you tell your story. Let us take care of us proving ourselves, because your story's there. We just have to make sure that we are able to present it in a manner that gives you the respect you deserve in the tremendous journey that you had to go through. So, Monica, so I'm going to sit back for a minute. I think Connie is too. And if you mind just taking us through the beginning of your journey.
Sure. So I grew up in a broken home. My parents got a divorce when I was like 24 months. Both my parents were alcoholic addicts. My dad ended up winning custody of me, so he ended up raising me. The home I grew up with, there was a lot of dysfunction. My dad definitely didn't have the tools. He came from dysfunction, so his parenting skills kind of came from what he knew. So there was a lot of different types of abuse in my home, which I think just kind of set me up for just kind of being a troubled child. I first interactions with the system was having social services come in and do interviews based on some of the allegations of abuse towards my dad. And so I kind of spiraled because of those things. We moved a few times. I grew up in southern Minnesota. It was a really small rural community. And I just really struggled to kind of fit in. We ended up moving when I was about 8 years old to Washington, D.C., which that was like a huge culture shock, going from a really small, pretty much white community to a very big, large, diverse community that I had never experienced before. And I noticed my dad's stress level went up, which caused more abuse in the home and just being alone more. And that's when I started using. My dad did use drugs, so marijuana was around, and that was became my drug of choice. And to me, that was kind of a way I coped with dealing with stress. And I just remember always feeling like that I wanted to feel just that numbness that alcohol and drugs give you. And that was kind of what I searched for. Now, when I got sober, my mom got clean and was trying to kind of put her life together after using and all her issues. We ended up moving back to Minnesota, back to the same small town I grew up in, and I really didn't fit in. So that I definitely learned, like, when you go from a small town to a big town, you have to accommodate. You have to learn how to fit in. Things about me changed. You see a different side of the world, and I definitely came back a different person, and I just didn't fit in even more than I did before. And because I was using and drinking, I definitely didn't fit in with the age group, and started hanging around with older kids. Ended up with an older boyfriend. And at age 12, my older boyfriend sexually assaulted me. That didn't go over very well in my household. My dad was not very happy when it came out. And I ended up running away from home. And that was kind of when the system got involved with me as far as me being kind of a troubled youth by running. They ended up finding where I was, ended up putting me in kind of a runaway shelter that we had in the town that my mom lived in. And sorry. From there, my mom ended up taking me for a period of time. And she was living with my grandparents, going to college. And I just couldn't get it together. I couldn't stop using. I just found the same type of friends. I just really, I don't know. I was a really unhappy kid. That's all I can say. I just felt really unhappy, and I just didn't know how to be happy. And I just wanted to feel numb all the time. The sexual assault definitely didn't help anything for me. And I just kind of continued to spiral, and my mom didn't really know what to do with me. I ended up losing my virginity by being gang raped by two older gentlemen in the town I was living. They were pretty well-known drug dealers and gang members in our town, and so I ended up having a lot of death threats and just a lot of, I was not welcome at school, so I ended up skipping school a lot. And I had lost a lot of my friends, so I really felt alone. So my using continued to increase as situations in my life continued to increase. Because I was truant so much in our state, they have a thing that's called a CHIPS, and that's basically where the county becomes your guardian and kind of tries to get you in line, feeling that your parents can't. And as my using and skipping school continued, they ended up sending me to treatment. I had also had some times that I've tried to commit suicide, and I had went to like a couple psych wards for like 30 days too in that time period. So I had went to my first, it was a 35-day treatment, and did my time there. At the end, my social worker, guardian ad litem, and the judge decided that they didn't feel that I was ready to come home. I don't really know what happened, what made them decide that, but they felt that I needed more time, and so they decided to send me to a halfway house. And so they sent me to a halfway house. Again, all of these places were far from where I'm from, but that was in southern Minnesota. So I was 13. I was the youngest person in the halfway house. And there was definitely rules when you get in there, like you can't see your family, you can't talk to them until you kind of earn the rights to. And I just seemed to struggle. They seemed to have a lot of issues with me. I wasn't quite sure what it was. But the one thing I was able to do was go to school. And it was alternative school, so it was kind of a school away from the high school. It was kind of across.
Monica, if I may, because you're going to cross into the second part of the story. By the way, already a lot of stuff here that, if it's okay, I was wondering if we can ask, because me and Connie have been taking notes. As you can see, Connie, when she leaned back, she's typing her notes on the computer. When I look down, I'm writing the notes. And I was just wondering if I may ask a few questions. If I can go first. You know, obviously having problems home with your father, he was very aggressive with you. And then eventually, just the way the other boys treated you in your life, you were sexually assaulted and gang raped. Did you ever feel, because of how your father treated you at home, made you feel less than what you were worth? Did you ever feel that you were at fault for what's happening, or that you deserved what happened?
Definitely. You know, my dad, like, he kind of raised me to be kind of a wife. Like, that was kind of like, I was cooking suppers by the time I was 7. Like, supper had to be on the table by the time he got home from work. The house needed to be clean, you know, and so it was kind of like I was alone a lot of the time. And when I wasn't alone, it was very like, I had to learn at a really young age, like when he walked in the house, to be able to determine what kind of mood he was in. But during my sexual assaults and even my rape, my dad was very vocal of, this was your fault. You put yourself in this situation. I remember when he found out it was at the school, my best friend was afraid I was going to kill myself. And so she ended up going to our principal and telling him what had happened, because I wasn't telling anybody. And so the cops were called. So of course my dad was called, and my dad, before he even hit the room I was in, was screaming, she's a whore, she's a slut, I'm so embarrassed. Like, so it was like, definitely felt like it was my fault. Like,
how did you have the like courage to tell someone? Like, I mean, usually a lot of people, when they get sexually assaulted, they hold it inside, especially when they feel that it is their fault. And now here you are. Who was the first person you told that you were assaulted, and what gave you the courage to finally speak out?
So at that time I had a best friend. She's actually still my best friend. And I told her, I don't think it was ever like, I remember like when I grew up, like there is the after school specials, right? And then you'd have these people come to your town and they'd share their story of what had happened. And I remember maybe a couple months before, somebody had come, it was a rape victim. And then there was like an after school special about it. And I remember like some of us saying like, this would never happen to us. And so when it happened to me, I never thought about not telling her, but I did know like I didn't want anybody else to know. And so it was like I made her like promise me not to tell anybody. But there was things that were happening like to my body, like I was bleeding. And I was hurting, and I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know. And so I kind of went to her, and she promised not to tell, and she waited it was probably maybe 4 or 5 months before she finally told. But I continued to spiral out of control and get more and more depressed. And definitely I talked about killing myself. And she didn't know what to do with that. And so she went to, I don't know if she went to our counselor or she went to our principal. But she went to somebody and asked them or told them what had happened in her fear of what was going to happen to me. And because of my age and because of his age, they got the police involved right away. And so they brought me down and told me, you know, and she was definitely afraid I wasn't going to be her friend anymore. And so then the police got involved from that. And then they told both of my parents. And my mom was very supportive. You know, the one thing I've learned even as a parent now is you can only support or be as good of a parent as the tools that you have. And for a lot of parents, that's based on the parenting you've already experienced. And so both my parents, you know, just lacked, they lacked, unfortunately. And when you're using, you can't be your best self. And so my mom had only been sober for a few years, so she was still trying to figure out her life during that time.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something. I think what you just said right now is going to hit home. I know Connie has a question, but definitely you're right. You know, you're always going to be a reflection of your environment, you know, and if you were in a household where, you know, the environment wasn't as beneficial to you growing up, then obviously what's going to happen here is that you could fall trapped to it. But I'll tell you something right now, you found a way, and we'll talk about that, how you didn't fall trapped to that, because sometimes just the opposite could happen. Sometimes the aggressive environment will remind you that's not what you want your kids to live through. So, you know, and you've developed a pattern that broke away from the household that you were born into. And that's what makes your household as amazing, makes you an amazing person, because you went against what most people would have conformed to. I know Connie has some questions, again, with the first part of your story. So this is how we do it. You're taking us on a journey, but remember, you're holding our hands, and we're kids looking to the left and right. So I got what I needed out. Connie?
Yeah, so I guess I was thinking just about the whole process of being, removed from your dad and then mom taking over, still going into an unstable living environment with mom. Like, and I guess with all the research out there that talks about what happens when children are separated from their parents, right? Whether it's the government, an agency taking you away from your parents, or you running away, and it sounds like, I think part of the beginning of your story you talked about running away. So do you feel like in that time that you were possibly looking for love that you weren't getting from either of your parents?
Definitely. I mean, there was a lot of trust. Like, me and my mom had a lot of issues. So because she, my dad filled my head with lies as far as like why I wasn't with her. He had told me that she left me and that she left me for years. And that wasn't the truth, but that as a kid, that's what you believe. She actually lost custody of me, and she did leave for 6 months, and then she came back. But as a kid, you don't understand how the courts work. You don't understand that a judge is making the decision. You just see your mom not saving you. I'm sorry. I've never really talked about this part. Never saving you from this. You're telling her how bad it is. She sees how bad, she knows how bad it is. And she just keeps on taking you back every time you go to see her. So you start to mistrust, and there definitely was abandonment issues with my mom. And my dad, I just was afraid. I was afraid of him. And so when I was with another boy, and I ran and was and stayed at his house for a while. So I know for me, it's like I was running to find safety, to find definitely love, but definitely safety, like just to feel safe. And it was really hard when I had to leave that house, because it was probably the first time that I felt fully safe. And then what I learned was, when they would put me in these placements, I would feel safe there because it was consistent. And that was something that I think it was like, once you kind of have a taste of that, you kind of long for that. I feel bad for my mom, because when I ran, before I went to live with her, I was in a place, and I feel like there was things that maybe they could have done, or the social workers, the people that were involved, to help give her the tools on how to help parent me, or how to help me deal with the trauma I had just endured, with even the sexual trauma. But nobody was really there for her. I mean, we have many conversations now about this, and it was just kind of like, here you go.
Yeah, because I mean, that was like my next question. My next question really was, if you were already part of a system, I find it like, how is it that they couldn't give her some tools to help you? Like, it's almost like, so you understand the emotional side of things, of what's happened with your dad. You understand his history of substance abuse. I mean, and then all the other things that kind of lead to that. So I was just wondering, what role did they play in trying to help give her tools to support you?
They really didn't give her any tools. They weren't really there for her at all. It really seemed like, even from talking to her, like they were there when I was in trouble, and they needed to step in and kind of shame, let's lock her up, or where are we going to put her? But like, when it came to like how to make me successful and how to help me through those things, they weren't really there for that. They weren't really there to help either one of us through that. And that's something that I really try, like when I do trainings and stuff, I try to, like when we talk about prevention of anything, we have to start with parenting, and parenting classes, and offering, parenting assistance. And, instead of shaming, I talk a lot about like, when working with clients, when you have an expectation for that individual to do something, you can't just assume that they know what you want them to do. Like, I worked in housing for a period of time, so they'd always want their clients to keep their apartment clean, and I'd be like, well, did you have that conversation before you moved them in? Well, yeah, I told them it needed to be clean. Well, there's a lot of different cleans. Like, your expectation of clean and my expectation of clean might be very different. They're coming from homelessness, or, there's lots of, different looks of what it is. Crack houses have a certain type of clean, like, if that's what the clean they're used to. I mean, that's the best way, like, I can be like, have you ever been in a crack house? Well, some people haven't. And I'm like, well, there's a type of cleanliness that goes along with crack houses. Like, if that's what they know, then that's what you're getting, And so some of it is, it's like, if we have expectations of people of how we want them to handle situations or handle children, if they don't know those things, how do we expect them to do them if we're not willing to teach them and to give them the resources? And I think that's still something, unfortunately, in our society that is still missing. And I think that's what puts youth continuously at risk of a lot of different things, not just human trafficking, but a lot of different things, because that's missing for parents.
There's something that you mentioned about the fear that you had at home. And I'm just going to remember a story. I haven't thought about this for many years, but I worked in a female facility, and I remember I was watching a smoke break, and there was an inmate that it came up. She was usually a very private inmate, very little talking. But for some reason, I used to have this thing where inmates would just talk to me. It's just, because they look for consistency, I think. And I was always a consistent officer. They knew what to expect from me, but they also knew that I was very fair and objective. I mean, I always did what's right. And I think that's what actually got me into the position I'm in now. You knew what to expect from me. Even my peers did, I like to think for the most part I was respected by my peers, at least the ones that matter, the ones that did what they were supposed to do. She was in for murder, and she was sharing her story about how it was when she was a child, and things that she learned to accept as she got older. And one thing was, I remember just a very powerful story that she had said, was when she was a kid, most people are afraid of the dark because of what's in the dark. But there are some kids that embrace the dark because they're afraid of what's in the light. The people that were supposed to love her were the people that she was afraid of. And therefore, she embraced the dark. She had no problem walking out at night and then finding people who only hung out at night, the gang culture. And then I also said, well, how would you go from one abuse to another? And she goes, because it's different when you're abused by people that you really don't care about, as opposed to being abused by the people that you do care about. So she learned to accept the behavior of the gang members because, again, it wasn't done from the people that she truly loved. And in the end, again, we had that small dialogue, but it reminded me, the dialogue came to my mind the moment you said about being afraid. I thought that was just, I haven't thought about that dialogue. I've been out of the female facility for, 8-9 years now. So that was pretty interesting how it all came back to that one dialogue. Connie, you have anything else with the first part of the story?
Yeah, so I guess I had a question about, so really just going through a sexual assault at the age of 12, like, what does the hospital do to support that? Because I'm just thinking, that is a very young age. I mean, developmentally, you're still developing, and you may not even know what's going on with your body. Like, so, because all I'm thinking is, so that happened at 12, and then you experience a gang rape, right? Is that still at 12, or is that at 13 at that point?
Yeah, I was 13. Yeah. The only time for the first assault, because there was no, I don't even know the right terminology, because it was only a certain level of assault, of a sexual assault.
If I may, it's okay. We're all adults here. You said you lost your virginity on the second assault. So you just want to say penetration.
Yes.
It's okay. We're all adults. So as long as you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Am I wrong?
You're
All
fine.
right. Sorry.
So because of that, there was no medical exam done for the first one. And he actually ended up taking a plea deal. So we never really went to court on it. He took a plea deal, and that was that. There was evidence that they found in his van. There was enough evidence that I guess he took a plea deal. So with the second one, I didn't tell anybody. Actually, they found out because they started. So we were at like a store that was across from our high school, and or across from our school, and they had video on it because a bunch of us were smoking over there, and so they were trying to figure out who was skipping, what was going on, and I had truancy issues, and so I didn't go. I had a friend who said, "Hey, do you want to come party with us?" I thought there was going to be a bunch of people at this house that we went to. It ended up being him and two other guys, and it was on camera, and so then it was on camera when I came back, and how I was looking and how I was acting, and the school ended up filing a police report. And then I did have an exam done, and they saw that my hymen was not intact. And so then I did open up about what happened and told them what happened. It was pretty traumatic. And they did charge them, and it was pretty awful. I went to court. I had friends turn on me. I mean, they were pretty well protected. I wasn't able to go to school for a period of time because the school couldn't keep me safe, and there was death threats to my life. So that was, I mean, the doctor who did the check on with the rape kit, it was actually a doctor. It wasn't a nurse. It's not, I've gone through SANE exams now. It wasn't, it was not like it is now. And I don't know if that has changed in the years. I'm sure it has. But it was a small town, so it was a doctor I knew. But I mean, it's still quite traumatic, and you know, but I think because of all the things that happened even after that, that was not as traumatic as the whole court case and everything that went on after that.
Because the court case, was that more of you reliving and having to sort of it's almost like being victimized all over again?
Actually, the court case was, to begin with, was a 5-day trial of them bringing people to prove that I was a liar and was not worthy to testify. Wow. And the guys were in the court. Well, then one of them ended up pleading guilty. He took a plea deal. But it was so bad that my mom ended up telling them that we were done, that it was destroying me. I tried killing myself a couple of times during that time, and my mom said, if you guys can't win this case without her testimony, then we're done, and they dropped the case.
Wow, I'm so sorry. Like, because there's so many times we hear stories where we're trying to discredit the victim and do all these other things to sort of protect the wrong person. And so, you know, thankfully your mom was able to speak up. And I mean, I don't know what may have happened to make the other guy, you know, plead guilty, but did they actually have the tape?
Well, no. Well, they had the tape of me going with him. He actually pled guilty because he was in the courtroom, and he just felt guilty. He said he knew what he did to me was wrong. He saw what it was doing to me, and he just said he knew he was supposed to plead guilty. It was definitely because he ended up apologizing to me, and like a bunch of people were saying I was lying about the entire thing, and he actually stepped up and was like, that's how people left me alone finally, was because he finally stepped up and said, this happened.
You know, that must be, if I may, that must be that's a conflict for me, because you have someone that did something so aggressive against you, raped you, and then turns out to be the hero of that story to some extent. what I mean by bringing, yeah, that, and by the way, I just want to make sure, like, I know I wasn't laughing at what the concern. I want you to ever think that when I was trying to bring the story out. I know sometimes our nerves get the better of us because it's a tough question, but I did catch that when you mentioned that you were sexually assaulted, but you mentioned on the second one that you had lost your virginity. Yeah. And I was actually going to have that as a question, but Connie was already on that, and it shows you that we're always in sync. And I just want to say, as we move forward, so I know we're going to get to the second part, unless Connie has any other questions to ask you. Just for the first part alone, I'm sure you didn't expect this. We did not prepare this. We did not script this. I think you're phenomenal. And I just do. I hear the pain in your voice, but I also hear just someone else coming out saying that it has to be heard. So there's the pain matched with the courage, which just makes it that much more powerful. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciate what you're saying. And Connie, we want to move forward. Do you have one more to?
No, we can definitely move forward. I mean, I myself, and I'm trying to digest it all. I mean, I think the resiliency that I see just in you telling this story and just maintaining your composure, because clearly it's still something that hurts. And so I'm really I'm trying my best to not sob. It's I know I have to take it in, and it's really trying to really understand what you went through. And I just can't imagine that, at the age of 12 or at the age of 7, you're cooking and you're playing this role of wife, right? And then here are all these adult responsibilities, and then you get thrusted into these adult situations, which I just can't imagine developmentally at that stage in your life, that how you could even handle it. And now here as the adult, you're in this space where you can help other people heal, which I think is amazing.
Thank you.
Right. And my connection to it all is I have 2 daughters, 7 and 3. So, I think obviously this would be something that they could watch later on in life, not now. But if this was to happen to one of my children, I mean, God forbid, not to minimize what happened to them, but me as a father, I don't know how I'd react to that, because I would also feel some level of responsibility because I couldn't protect them. But the part of the story we're at now is you're at the alternative school. So I'm assuming where you meet the gentleman that introduces you into this unique world. So I'm going to, again, step off, and then we're going to hear your second part.
Okay. So if, like I said, when I started going, I felt very alone, and met this, he was older than me. He was Hispanic. And we started talking. He had been to the town that I was from. So we started, I kind of started the conversation do we know the same people? He knew some of the same people. He actually knew one of the guys who gang raped me, who was actually kind of still looking for me. And so he had just said, he's still looking for you. Don't worry. I'll make sure nobody knows you. Make sure he doesn't know you're here. You'll be protected by me. So he kind of, played this protective role. He would bring me cigarettes. He would bring me, just little gifts. And every break we'd have, he'd be right there listening to me. And I say listen because, I said this in the other part. I say this every time I speak. Listen is the key word when it comes to these exploiters. But he spent time. And so it had been quite a few months that we had developed and became, boyfriend and girlfriend, and things continued to just be bad at the halfway house. I hadn't seen my parents in probably 5 months, and it wasn't looking like I was supposed to be there for 6 months, and it wasn't looking like I was going to get out anytime soon. I didn't even know how to get out at this point. It just seemed like anything I did was just negative. And so he convinced me to run. He told me he lived in a trailer by himself and I could stay there with him. And I just felt hopeless, and he felt like a safe person for me. And so I did. He developed this plan on how I could run and not get caught. I followed it, ended up at his trailer, hung out with him for a little bit there. And then he's like, let's go to a party and celebrate. And so we did. And I didn't ever think, like, at the party it was, a lot of Hispanic men, or, at first it was a lot of Hispanic, kid, like his age, older, a few older men, but there was no females there. But I guess I never even thought about it when I think back now, like, why didn't I ever think this is really weird? But I didn't. He gave me a drink. Like it was in a cup, and said, here, have some. There was a keg, so I just thought it was some of that. And I don't really remember much after that. I remember waking up, feeling pretty drugged. I couldn't move anything besides my head. There was a guy on top of me who I didn't know. I remember moving and looking, and the door was like over to the side, looking and seeing this guy who I thought was my boyfriend at the door. He had money in his hand. There was a line of men, and I just like remember like I couldn't say anything, and I passed out again. And when I woke up, I was locked, like I was handcuffed in a basement. There was a Hispanic older gentleman there. He spoke very little English. I remember that, and I remember still feeling pretty high, so I felt like he was still like giving me things to keep me pretty sedated. I think we were like in his mom's house, honestly. Like I always remember hearing this person walking, and it sounded like a woman, and he would be like super quiet when she was around. And I don't know, I guess it could have been his wife. I just always had this feeling it was his mom. And he performed sexual acts. He kept me there for quite a few days. He eventually then brought me back to who I now consider my first pimp. And he acted very like I left with this guy on my own, and what a whore I was, and how embarrassed he was of me, and just like went off on me. And I felt really afraid. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know anybody. I felt like he was all that I had. And so I just pleaded and begged, please don't break up with me. I'm sorry. Like, it was just this, I don't know. I've had people ask me, like, why didn't I fight, or why didn't I just leave or run? I just felt hopeless. I felt like I deserved what he was saying to me, and he was probably right. And maybe it was my fault. And, but I needed him. And so he said that people were looking for me, and it wasn't safe for me to be there, and that we should go to Texas, but he couldn't go yet. So his cousin was going to come and take me to Texas, and that he was so disgusted with me, I should wait outside till his cousin came. And so I did. I want to say one thing in my story, like, I didn't believe in God. I was pretty angry at God. There was a lot of things that had happened even when I was little that I blamed God. I had an aunt and cousin pass before a few days before my third birthday, and that was really when I really started to get angry at God. So I didn't believe in God, but I definitely now believe God tried to save me or tried to protect me the best he could. But my mom showed up out of nowhere. Her and my aunt, like, were like ninjas or something. They just came out of nowhere, and like the next thing I know, they're like behind me, picking me up and like running off to taking me to the car. It was just like it happened like that. And so I mean, they basically saved me from that situation. I don't know what would have happened if they would have actually gotten me down to Texas. I can just imagine. But so my family ended up taking me back to my mom, where my mom was living with my grandparents. She, of course, had to contact my social worker and law enforcement, everybody, and let them know that, I had been found. And so while they determined what the next steps were for me, I was begging and pleading, please just let me stay home. I had learned my lesson. I wouldn't run again. I'd behave. I just wanted to stay home. But nobody ever asked me what happened when I was on run. I always thought that was interesting. My mom didn't even ask me. But the courts decided that I had a boy problem, and I was obviously still using because I was pretty loaded when my mom found me, and that I needed to go to an all-girls halfway house. So they decided it'd be best if they sent me to one really far from where I'm from. So I'm from southern Minnesota, so they sent me to one to northern Minnesota. And I kept telling them, if you send me, I'm going to run. I don't want to be there. I'm going to run. You know, I didn't want to be locked up, but they sent me anyways. And, you know, there's one thing about exploitation is there's recruiters. And I'm sure you guys working in prisons probably know about recruiters. But for me, you know, back in those days, like, this wasn't a topic that was talked about at all. Like, I mean, rape was, you know, but trafficking, no. So I didn't even realize what had just happened to me. I didn't realize, like, that was a thing. I didn't realize that was something that happened all over. I didn't ever had heard the word recruiter. So I didn't know about any of this, but exploiters or pimps, they will send, like in my situation, they'll send youth, they'll get youth that will get in trouble, and they'll send them to facilities, girls and boys. And then when they're in their facility, their job is to convince as many individuals to run with them, and then I mean, there's all different ways they do it, but then to take them back to the exploiter or the pimp. And unfortunately for me, that was the case. There was a girl there, and she was a recruiter, and she asked me if I wanted to run, and I wanted to run, and I was at that facility for maybe 4 hours, maybe 6, and I wasn't there very long. The place took us to an AA meeting that night, and we went, and we didn't go, we stayed outside smoking, and we didn't go into the meeting. We took off, and we ran from Moore, Minnesota to Minneapolis, which is quite a few hours. And it was the beginning to be winter time, and we hitchhiked and walked the whole way to Minneapolis. And when we got to Minneapolis, she kind of had this plan of what we were going to do, where she was going to take us. She took me to some older gentlemen's houses, who I later found out were her Johns. And she basically told me I had to do whatever sexual thing they wanted me to do so that we could stay there for food. One gave us a ride. She cut my hair, she colored it. And she basically then started teaching me. Like, we would go walk different streets. Gentlemen would throw things at us that it would have on the paper what they wanted, how much, and she would determine if I would go do that or not. And she took me to other gentlemen's houses and continued to do that for a period of time. She eventually took me to, it was an apartment building, and took me to my second pimp, who was there, and basically handed me over to him. And then he placed me, it ended up being, I don't know if he owned the place, but he definitely ran it. It was a crack house for the most part. He was in control of a lot of the apartments there. He ended up putting me in an apartment with an older woman who had 2 kids. She was pretty, she definitely was a crack addict. But she also worked for him. So she started to kind of show me, we would walk Lake Street or Broadway. He would book private parties for me that he would take me to. But he created this environment. Like, he was, he never romanced me. He played more kind of a daddy role. He was very kind to me when I got there. The girl who had recruited me didn't take very good care of me. Like, she took care of herself. I kind of stayed in the same clothes that I ran with. I hadn't taken a shower for a while. And he made sure, like, I had a new outfit, and I ate something because I hadn't eaten for a while, that I got to sleep. Like, he just like really stepped in of this, like, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to care for you. Tell me about you. Why did you run? You know, wanted to hear my story, really listen to me. I was really afraid to fall asleep. And so he like cuddled with me. And so he really played this kind of daddy role. So there was kind of this family kind of setting he put in this apartment for me that felt safe, except for the fact that I would have to go do these awful things. And one thing you learn, I think I learned after the first sexual assault, was how to leave your body, how to not just not be there, to be kind of become somebody else. So you can just get through that moment. I just need to get through this moment so I can get to this good moment. So I'm going to do whatever I have to get through this bad moment, because I can just get to this good moment. And some of that probably comes from the way it was in my household growing up. Like, if I can get through this bad moment with my dad, there's going to be a good moment. So you can just get through that. And so we did that for a while. I remember even one time, like, you go through the struggle. I remember the struggle, like, could I leave? Is there any way I could leave? When I first was there, I remember calling my grandma at one point. But I didn't. I ended up staying. I got closer with some of the women. He would every Sunday, he had this bigger house that was like in a suburb that we would go to. And so that was kind of I always looked forward to Sundays, because that was like the family fun night. So we would, you know, a big dinner would be cooked, and we'd play games and do each other's hair. And, you know, it was just this fun thing. And I really enjoyed that piece of it. But it was also a part that I started to realize, like, how many women were involved in what he was doing, because there would just always be a lot of them. And I remember my first time I went there, the woman I was staying with even said to me, "Did you think we were the only ones?" And it was like, yeah, I did. But like, prostitute or pimp or those kind of words, like, were never used. I mean, I guess in his household, you know, I know that some do. It wasn't used. It was just, this is what we do. So
Monica, no. I wanted to ask you something, because there's obviously a lot. There's something that you touched on that I want to make sure people don't overlook. This person, sometimes I say the word gentleman, guys. Believe I don't. I know this person is not a gentleman, obviously. But it looks like, and me and Connie touched on this in an episode about obligation. It looks like he does all this stuff so you owe him, or you feel that you have to pay them back. And I think for people that are going through this, or maybe with somebody that is doing that, they need to understand right off the bat that you don't owe this person nothing. You know, they're exploiting you. But having said that, they're giving you all these good things. And I'm sure at one point you felt like, well, he's giving me a home, he's giving me this, he's giving me that. I have to do this, you know, to pay them back. And I don't want to overlook that. That to me was a very important part of what you just said, how he kind of made you feel obligated. And that's part of the reason why you maybe felt that you had to do what he wanted you to do. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. You definitely. But you also feel a sense, you know, every exploiter or pimp is different. They all have different tactics of how they control the individuals that they're trafficking. My pimp definitely played the daddy role. So he knew, because I had told him what my dad was like. He knew what my household was like. So there was a lot of like this, like him never like calling me a hoe or telling me how to, but there was always kind of like, you know, your family will never accept you once they know, you know, that, you know, nobody's going to love you the way I love you, you know, and never laid hands on me. And so that was another huge thing. Like, I don't lay hands on you. Like, look at how well I take care of you. Look at what I do compared to what your family did, look at, so all you have to do is do this for me, and that's what keeps us as a big family. We all watch out for each other, so it was more kind of like that type of talk of, you do the small thing for me and look at all this other things I provide for you. So then you feel like obligated, like I want to keep this family. I like this feeling, like I like feeling safe. I like knowing he's not going to lay hands on me. I like that he doesn't call me mean things, or he tells me that I'm pretty or I'm smart. I like those things because those were things that I felt like I was lacking. I like that he felt bad when I told him what these other people had done. Not realizing it's so weird, but you don't realize, like, well, he's doing the exact same thing to you. Like, your mind doesn't process it that way, especially at my age. I don't think it ever processes that because they play like this mental game with you, and so you believe everything they're saying.
Well, when you mentioned, and I know Connie definitely has some questions. I just want to do one more, if I may, and then if Connie, because there's a lot here that I thought we could just touch on a little bit, if it's okay. When you talked about hopeless being for now, obviously hopeless is feeling that you can't get out, and also feeling. I mean, I know you said you felt hopeless because maybe at some point you had questioned your value, and maybe this was the life. Maybe this is somehow what you have deserved, and which obviously you don't. But with that said, I also feel something when it comes to hopeless was that I think that your view of the world was very limited based on this is how the world has treated me. So this is the best way of that treatment. So and it's sad to see it this way, but in that limited parameter, if this is all you know, I believe you felt hopeless because if I escape, I'm going to escape just to a different level of this. So at least at this point, this is a level that have points that has good moments within that comparison of however limited that comparison may be. Because you said you were talking about going through the bad moments, but really staying focused on whatever that good moment will be coming. Well, I mean, that good moment is still in a shitty world, right. And I think you wind up becoming hopeless because at that point is I have more good moments here, or how I define good moments than bad moments. So I'm going to stay here because if I leave, it's going to just be more bad moments. And what a horrible way. Just it's tough. I'm speechless, Connie. So you're going to have to,
I think
up.
It's like, what would I go back to? Right. Like that, what am I going back to? Like, I ran away for a reason. So what am I going back for? Because they're just going to lock me up again. Nobody seems to want me. I definitely was hopeless for a lot of my life. Like I mentioned, my aunt and cousin died a few days before my birthday. Like, they were my hope. Like, they were the people in my life that loved me unconditionally, that probably could have saved me from so many things and tried, and they were taken. So for me, that at age, at such a young age, that hope was taken from me. So I definitely always believed everything that had happened in my life, I was being punished. Like, even though I wasn't with them when they died, I always had this feeling like I should have died. Like, I should have been the one to die, not my cousin. Like, he would have made something of his life, and I was just a disgrace to my family. And so when you just, your soul, you just feel that all the time, every day you wake up, you just feel like, just pray to die. So then when you meet this individual who is telling you, no, you need to live and you're worth it, and you haven't been hearing that from people, you're willing to do, anything for him because he makes you feel hope, a little bit of hope every day. Like, and that was something that I was lacking, of feeling that. And so then your bond, the longer you're with them, continues to grow because they continue to build that connection with you, so that your hope or your joy is built up from them. And that's what my second pimp was really good at doing with me, was that when I would get really upset, he would drop everything to be there, and that was just nothing I had experienced from anybody in my life that would, you know, when I needed them, they were just there like that with no excuses. And especially a male.
I mean, the one thing that really stands out is you talking about him listening, right? And so just knowing that he's listening and he's taking notes to really figure out what is the best angle I need to take in order to keep this one in line, right? Like, he wasn't physically abusive. He didn't say mean things to you. Like, all I'm hearing is, oh my God, he's using her story against her. And she's so young, she doesn't even realize that the more details that she gives him, the more crafty he's going to be in keeping her in line, you know? And, you know, I'm just thinking also too, so not only did, you know, your mom and your aunt save you, but they saved you and they didn't find out what happened. And now, essentially, they've agreed for you to go deeper into isolation, right? So now you're off into this place, you're on your own, and you've got this recruiter who's taking you even further into isolation, right? And so anyone who could be giving any positive influence to you is nowhere near you, right? And so all I'm thinking is now she has complete influence by this man who wants her to keep going out and making him money, right? And so is there a point where, or like what happened to kind of like make you think this is wrong or this is not something I should be doing? Like, I'm just thinking, because there was discomfort, he created a family for you, a family that you didn't have, right? So here it is, you're looking forward to Sundays, which are your family time. And in that family time, he's also now saying, here's what I'm doing for you. I'm not asking much of you in return, right? So like, how do you pull yourself out of that? Because now he's created this safe space for you.
So basically for me, I didn't want to leave. Like, I wanted to stay with him forever. So my mom, I don't know, God, you know, my mom came out to the cities, and she did a lot of research and paid a lot of people, and found out where I was, found the apartment building that I was in. So two of my buyers were the girl who took me's brothers. And so my mom, I think she had paid them some money. They finally broke down and told where I was. My mom tried to get law enforcement involved. And they would in a sense, but not really. The first time that they came, we had gotten a heads up that they were coming, so he was able to get me out of there and hide me. They came back the second day, and my mom had some other people go in, so these boys go in. I don't know if she knew at that time that they had bought me quite a few times. But she's just using people to do whatever she can. So they get me to come out. They acted like they were buying me and had me leave with them. I came out, and her and another one of my aunts. So my mom's Catholic, so she's got a lot of sisters. So there was a different aunt with her this time. Were there and got me in the car again. And I was pissed. I was not happy this time. I was not happy to see her. I was cussing her out. I think I kicked her a few times. I was not happy. And she took me to a place at that time that it was a place for women who have been on the streets. And they worked with prostituted women, if they needed different things. So the counselor there had me in a room talking to me, and I really thought that he was going to help me convince my mom to let me stay, And I tried to tell him all the great things that this individual was providing me and how happy I was. And I was the happiest I had been. And I didn't want to leave. Little did I know they were just lying to me, and they were buying time and waiting for law enforcement to show up to arrest me. And that's what happened. Law enforcement came in. They ended up handcuffing and shackling me and putting me in an ambulance. And the Twin Cities, there's like Minneapolis and St. Paul, they're pretty close, but there's a distance. So they wanted to get me out of Minneapolis, and they ended up taking me to St. Cloud. They took me to a locked children's psych ward. And I went there. I was there for quite a few months until the courts could decide what they were going to do with me. And that was where I had been there for a period of time, and that was where I realized that I was a prostitute and they were pimps. And that was when I made my decision that I didn't want to go back. And that came from, there was a counselor there, his name was Cedric. And I talk about that he had such an impact on me. I named my son after him. And he doesn't even know what an impact he had on my life. I always hope someday that maybe I'll get to see him again and can tell him, but because I kept trying to call. I called every time I had phone privilege. I didn't call my parents or my family. I called my pimp. And I called who I called Mama, the woman I lived with. That's who I called. My pimp tried a couple of times to get me out. It didn't work. But I would just I would try to run. I mean, it was pretty hard. You're a locked facility, but I remember trying to burn the plastic on the windows. With another girl, we tried to do everything we could to get out of there. And finally he's like, listen, I wasn't doing anything. I was definitely one of those, when I went in there, I was, what some call like that rah-rah teen, right? I was the pissed off teen. I was the cussing. I was swearing. I was always getting rolled up in tacos and being put in the padded room. Like, I just was out of control at all times. Like, I didn't want to be there. I was angry. I was felt unsafe. And he finally sat me down and he's like, you're going to go somewhere worse if you don't start working the program here. And you want to go back to this individual who doesn't give a shit about you. I'm sorry. It's just going to be, this is how he said it. You're money to him. And that's all you were, was money to him. He was a pimp and you were a prostitute. And you were just money to him. And that's the only reason he wants you back, is because he wants to continue to make money from you. He doesn't love you. He doesn't care about you. And if you stop calling him, he is going to disappear, and he's going to, or as soon as he can replace you, he's going to disappear. And I at first didn't believe him, but within a week, a phone number had been changed. He hadn't been answering as much. The relationships, he drifted away, just like what Cedric had said would happen. And so we started to have some more conversations about it. I started to kind of calm down a little bit more. But he was the only person really that talked to me about what had happened. And he was really the only person I was really telling about what really had happened. And that was kind of the start of my, okay, I don't want to go back to that. And it also, though, brought shame, because that word hadn't been used until that moment. And that wasn't his purpose, and I know that. But to all of a sudden realize, what that word prostitute means. And just the reality of what I had just gone through, really kind of sank in, okay, I can't hide from this. Of course, I had been sober for a period of time, so I really can't hide from this. And so those were demons that I started to really have to battle. The courts ended up deciding to send me to a locked facility, or it was partially locked facility in St. Cloud, which was probably 5.5 hours from where I'm from. And I was to do a year there. If I didn't do a year, I was 15. So if I didn't do a year there, if I ran from there, they had told me I would be locked up until I was 18 in a locked facility. And I didn't want that. So I really tried to make it work at that facility. But what had happened to me, the prostitution, the exploitation, none of that was talked about when I was at that placement. I actually there was one other person I had talked to during that time, but after that, I really didn't talk about it again for quite a long time. I worked on trying to get sober, and I worked on trying to deal with some of the other sexual abuse, and I did have some really good moments there. I started to develop a relationship with God. I had gotten sober. My mom decided, so when it came time for me to leave, I needed to know where I was going to go. My mom thought it'd be best, since I'd been up there, for her to move up there. So she moved up to St. Cloud. And she really wanted to make a life for me. Like, she really wanted me to get it. But again, there was no services for her. There was no services for me when I left. I had they had a school. The school was in this building, so it was a very small school. And when I left, they wouldn't allow me to continue to go to the school there. I ended up having to go to it was a pretty big high school. And that was a downfall for me, because I didn't know how to survive not being on the streets or not being in lockup. And I was still quite broken. And my mom had no parenting. She still had the same skills she had from the beginning, and then on top of, I'm even more broken. It went good at first. And then I had gotten a boyfriend, and he broke up with me, and I didn't know how to deal with that rejection, and I ended up relapsing. It kind of spiraled out from there. I ended up, my daughter's dad, who had met way back before I'd even went to my first treatment, right before my first treatment, actually, he was a lot older than me, had found me and got in contact with me. And I started hanging out with him and got in trouble. My mom ended up kicking me out. We got into a big fight. I did some stuff I shouldn't have, and she just didn't know how to deal with me. She kicked me out. And I remember asking her just recently, where did you think I was going when you kicked me out? And she thought I was going to my dad's, which I did try to go. And that was the last time my dad laid his hands on me. And it wasn't a good encounter. And so I left, and I ended up going and living with my daughter's dad. So I was 16. And I ended up emancipating myself at 16 and getting on a program that helped us pay for an apartment. And he was into gangs and thieving. And that's when I started getting into gang involvement. I actually became friends with some other people that were a part of a different gang than he was. So I would try to be a negotiator between them when they would have issues. And the other gang was big into selling drugs. So I got into making runs and selling drugs with them and stealing. And I started to exploit myself. It was what I knew. So when I needed drugs or rent or money, I would, have sex with men for it, because that's what I knew to do. And it that was kind of my life for quite a few years. It was just kind of this spiral. My daughter's dad had gotten in some trouble. We had moved out to Seattle for a while. He had a warrant. He ended up getting picked up in Seattle for doing some dumb stuff. And I ended up being stuck in Seattle, Washington at 16, having to try to figure out how I was going to get myself back to Minnesota. And that was a really interesting thing, but I was able to get myself back. turned 17, I was back living with my dad, having to pay rent for my dad at 17, and ended up meeting another guy that was in a different gang. There's a lot of cheating, a lot of stuff. He got jealous. I was at a party with my ex, my daughter's dad, and he tried to kill me, almost killed me. If it wasn't for my daughter's dad, I'd be dead today. Like, the cops said, like, it, where I was standing, it went right for my head. That's what he was aiming for. And that's actually probably the weekend that I got pregnant with my daughter. And I do want to say there's one thing I didn't share was when I got out of the life and I was at the psych ward, they do a bunch of medical tests because you're in a medical facility. And I was pretty sick, and I had a couple of STDs that had been untreated for quite a bit of time. It had caused me to have cervical cancer cells, which is kind of an onset to cervical cancer. I've had to deal with that most of my life, but I was told at 15 that I wouldn't, because of the damage that was done, I probably wouldn't be able to have kids. So that was a huge thing for me too. Like, I had never had protected sex. I just didn't care. I really didn't care about any of my boyfriends. Like, I just used them for, like, whatever I needed at that moment, just to not be alone, for a place to live, to feel wanted, to help me, feed myself, different things like that. It was real surface level stuff with me. And that kind of continued most of my life. I ended up finding out I had bipolar. I kind of figured something was wrong. I did get pregnant, which I was really excited for. I tried to clean up and do the right things for her, but my mental illness got really bad. I started having really bad manic moments, and was not diagnosed. And after I had her, was really struggling, and I ended up stealing my dad's checks, and I ended up with a felony check forgery. And almost went to prison. Luckily, the judge knew me from some of my previous cases. She knew my history and gave me a chance. She put me on probation and said if I finished probation, she'd drop it down to a gross misdemeanor. I still didn't get, I ended up moving out of the town, moving closer to my mom, tried to get my life together again, still was using, kind of had this cycle of, like, I'd try to get it together just a little bit, or like I'd stop drinking, but I'd still use drugs, or I'd stop using drugs, but I'd still drink, or maybe I'd stay sober for a period of time, but I'd still have, like, my friends over here that I was still kind of dabbling with. I just couldn't fully let go of what I was doing. I tried to go to school. I tried to, I just couldn't. And I know part of that was my mental health just never being treated and never being diagnosed. And I finally was, after I had a really bad manic again. And they started to put me on medication. And then something awful happened to my daughter. And that really was the start of things changing for me. My mom decided that we had to get away, and so she took me, my daughter, and herself, and we moved up to northern Minnesota, and that's where we live now. We've been up here for 18 years. I tried to kind of get it together, but her stuff triggered my stuff, and kind of spiraled a little bit more. Ended up getting pregnant with my son. That was really toxic. I really picked, like, toxic men. When I look back now, a lot of the men I picked were very similar to my dad or to my pimps. Very abusive, very verbally and physically abusive. I went through that for quite some time, some different relationships too. My son was about 2. Yeah. And I had passed out on his birthday, which was in August. And I couldn't stay sober. I tell people in my sobriety that my sobriety started actually, I used to get high in a shack. Like up in Minnesota, we have shacks, like fishing shacks, and people turn them into like just like a place to go hang out, smoking shacks, because it gets really freaking cold up here, like negative like 52 and stuff. So you know, so we were smoking in there and getting high, and one of the girls had said, you know, I wonder what it's like to be sober for a month. I was like, we're high right now. Why are you bringing this up? But I was like, it's stuck in my head. Like, that's God, right? Like, something will stick in your head like that. And so my whole goal was to stay sober for a day. I just wondered what it was like to be sober for a day. And because my using continued to get worse. Like, I couldn't make it an hour without being high. And so I tried and I couldn't. My mom was probably pretty fed up with everything, and I was pretty fed up with everything. I pretty much felt hopeless again and felt like I was no good to my kids and that they deserved better and that I was better just like walking away from them. And I was at the table writing a letter for my mom, gonna give her custody of my kids, and just like, I don't know what my plan was, but just to disappear. And my mom ended up walking in and just saying, I can't do this anymore. You have to get help. You have to do something, but we just can't do this anymore. And one thing, both me and my mom were very kind of boisterous, and we would fight a lot back then, very verbal. So it was really a moment for her just to come in and just calmly say these things and leave. I was a part of a dialectic behavioral therapy group to help with my mental illness, and there was a couple of people in there that were a part of recovery. And I ended up putting the notes away and going to group and asking one of the girls there if she'd take me to a meeting, and that's when I got sober. And there's a whole part of like even just making that choice to like be 100% sober was like a huge thing I had to decide. But I wanted it. I wanted something different. It was like it was like this crossroads in my life of either I'm going to get sober and something's going to really change here, or I'm going to die. Like that's like what it was for me. It was like there's no other options anymore because it's affecting my kids now. And so I did. I got sober. I worked really hard for it. And I had a couple of years of sobriety, maybe 4 or 5 years of sobriety. I ended up meeting my ex-husband, who's from Nigeria. And he was here going to school at our college. And so I was hanging out with not just him, but with a group of them. And that's how I ended up going to college for the second time. I feel like God put him in my life to force me to go to college. And then it was really bad marriage again. I have a bad picker and I pick really bad men. And then he kind of like plucked him out of my life when it needed to. But so one grateful thing I am, I guess, of my husband was that he forced me to go to school, and he forced me to be a social worker because I almost gave up on that too.
Well, if I may, as your life starts to turn around, because we are starting to pull ourselves out of the negative. So now you're starting to see a whole different world. I mean, now you're introduced to good things in your life, which make you start to question how you view the negative things in your life. But there's also, in that moment when you were trying to discover who you are, you also had positive. You had your children, you know, and, you know, now it's a matter of finding a way to balance the good with the bad, and being able to bring both as you start to move forward. So was it really, you were used to this world that was extremely negative, and I don't think you really realized how negative it was until you saw something that was genuinely good. So when you start to see the success, because really it's about the success in yourself. So as you start moving up and you start doing the right thing, you start going back to school, you start making these achievements, you start to increase how you see yourself, the value that you have now placed on yourself. You know, the work that should have been obviously seen a long time ago, but unfortunately when you're surrounded by just this limited perspective, it's just hard to see something that, may require a lot more effort. But again, it's just very hard to see. But now as you start seeing the good in what you're doing and the good in who you're becoming, how does that make you understand your past in a little bit of a different way?
I think at first it did. Well, I mean, I knew that there were certain things I had to deal with. And I think like definitely AA helped me in that sense of, there's a structure there and you have to go through the steps in order to stay sober. And so that was a huge part of my recovery, was that I was willing to do it all because I needed to stay sober this time. And my sobriety wasn't easy. Like I clenched almost every single day for the first probably 4 years. So I think it was slow. It had to be slow for me of dealing with, the abuse, dealing with the rapes, dealing with the losses, working on stuff with me and my mom, going to counseling with her, getting myself a good counselor. At that time, I had a bad counselor. I ended up switching to a different counselor who I've been with now for the last 11, 12 years. We've gone off a few times, but that was really important. Having a counselor that you can trust, that's not going to judge you. So there was different pieces that had, slowly took place, but it wasn't immediately like that for me. I think that there was always, I always struggled with not needing that chaos that comes with being on the streets and being in the life and that stuff. I think I always kind of somewhat created that in like the men I picked, or having problems like having friends, or creating arguments with my mom. There was always some type of chaos still in my life, even through my sobriety. That took me a really long time to get rid of. Actually, it only went away fully a couple of years ago.
So Monica, would you say that you survived your past, or would you say that this is something you're actively working to heal and grow from and actually see yourself as a survivor?
So I see myself as a survivor because I'm alive and I shouldn't be. But just because I'm a survivor, that doesn't mean my trauma has gone away. I still live with my trauma every single day. It's just I have tools now of how to deal with it in a healthier way than I used to. But I've come to accept that I used to kind of wonder like, okay, when's that day when it's just like not going to be there anymore? Like, it's not going to hurt anymore. And I realized like that doesn't ever happen. Like you don't get over, rape victims don't get over that. Sexual assault, they're never going to fully get over that. It's always going to be a part of who they are. And there's always going to be pain that's associated with that. So
it's really important that you say that, because sometimes, there's this expectation that, well, it already happened, like you're going to get over it, or, that healing process, that journey to get to a place where you feel at least half of who you are. I think there's some people who may think like, well, that happened 20 years ago. Why would you still be feeling that way? And so I really appreciate you just saying that, it's a process and that pain doesn't go away and the trauma doesn't go away. It's still a part of who you are.
Right. Hey, Monica, if I may ask, I want to compliment on something that Connie thinks. So forgive me because I'm developing this thought as it comes. It's just something that came to my mind. But you went through such a tremendous past, right, where your perspective of the world was very limited. I mean, you really saw the darkness of the world with a very limited light. So with having that as the foundation of how you relate to the world, right? Bear with me on this. How do you know where you need to be, though? Like, how do you know what it is that you need to embrace to turn your life around? I mean, is it something that you're actively seeking on your own, or you still have to be guided through?
It definitely was something that I was seeking on my own at first, but then I would find, I definitely believe in my story and my belief, and I don't push out in any way. I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person. So God, of my understanding, continue to put people and places and things in my path to be like, you're not alone. And here's somebody who, if I make that choice to connect with them, can teach, I can learn something from them. And that was kind of what I have had, is these people will kind of come into my life and like help me through this part of my journey. And I've been really blessed. Like my counselor is one of those people. My mom is one of those people. Like my mom has grown and changed and become such a different person, and this helped me raise my kids. I am so blessed to have her, and it has not been easy. We have fought, we have had to go through the hard times, we have shed many, many tears, but I wouldn't be here today without my mom. And I feel we've been together now for 18 years and we're still going strong. We're still staying, but I feel like she finally got to raise me.
Well,
and that's a rare experience that I think somebody in my situation gets, where you get to have that redo. Right.
And first off, that's extremely powerful, because you actually could see that there was a bit of a troubled relationship between you and your mom. But then when it came down to the fact that she was there for you, though, when it mattered. I mean, I always talk to something about quantity versus quality, but it seems to be that even though she had her own demons to battle, she still seemed to be your hero. She would come up out of nowhere and swoop you up out of the dark. And I don't know if Connie may have one more question. I do have one more, and then I know we could start bringing the show down. But real quick, when we talk about comparisons, right? So kind of to bring a little bit of a complete circle here, there's where you were and where you're at now, right? Mm-hmm. And if I could draw a scenario here, I'm trying to get it as it comes. I'm picturing like when I was a kid, the North Star. Your North Star, your destinations, where you want to go. It's my end result, right? What is the difference between the North Star when you were a kid to the North Star where you are at now, like in the different location where you want to be? What was it that you were trying to accomplish as a kid that obviously is a total 180 to where you're at now?
So as a kid, like as a teenager?
Like, yeah, because you know what? A lot of people that may watch this could be troubled teens. They could be teens that are going through, but they may have a very, like even though you knew your mother was doing the best for you, you still were kicking and screaming. So
because trust was gone. So that trust had been broken with her. I didn't trust that she cared. That trust had been broken. So I just didn't trust her. When I was a teenager at that point, for me, I really was living to die. And I'm sure a lot of other teens can understand that, what that means. It means like I'm living every day, but if I die today, it's okay. Like I'm not thinking about risks of anything. I'm not thinking about the consequences of anything. I'm just trying to survive today. And if I don't make it through it, that I'm okay with that. And today, I live to live. I don't know what's to come. My dreams, like from when I was little, have definitely changed. Like I remember being little and like I wanted to have a good job. I wanted a husband. I wanted, I did get the 2 kids. I wanted the white picket fence. I wanted the big wedding. I wanted all these things. Well, I got the 2 kids. I got a nice house. I have a white picket, but I didn't get the husband. I didn't get those things either, because I think of, I still have things broken in me, and those are still things. It doesn't mean those dreams are going to come true, but now my dreams are, to be with my family, to enjoy every moment I have with my kids, and to try to be the best person I can be. When I started college, like I never intended to like tell my story. Like I never wanted to talk in front of people. Like that like made me sick. Like, so to be where I am, that's definitely to me God. And so I try to use my story to make a difference. I wish trafficking would end in this world. I wish trafficking was an important issue in this world. And it's just not as important as other issues. Other issues always seems to come before when we start to talk about trafficking, and it kind of takes yeah, it's there, we'll deal with it, but it's, and so that's why I keep doing it. I keep hoping to change when I work with social workers or when I work with people who work with youth, like to help make them be more understanding that these youth aren't just rah for any type of reason or just to be assholes to you. They're broken kids, or law enforcement. I try to tell them all the time, kids that are running for a reason. There's something wherever they're running for, something's wrong there. Kids don't just run for fun. I mean, maybe there's like a small percentage, but the most kids, because I'll say that and then someone will be like, but I know this one kid, it's like the majority of kids that are running and constantly running are running because something is broken there. And we need to start listening to our kids. We need to start listening to each other. We need to start hearing each other's stories. And that's just something we're not doing right now. We're so involved with ourselves that we're not paying attention.
Well, I think you definitely answered the question when we were talking about the stars, when you said, when I was a kid, I lived to die. And now as an adult, I live to live. I just wanted people to understand that when I brought up your mom was, I wanted to understand where her intent was and why you would not feel that intent was good for you, So basically, maybe, I don't know if there was just the fact that you got so used to that world that, it became something which you said that you settled. This is just how my life's going to be. And then that becomes your norm. And then when people are telling you that there's good in this world and they're trying to convince you of the good, you don't see that for yourself. So now it's great to hear you say at the very end of it all, which kind of, wraps up the dialogue a little bit, is that when I was a kid, because I think this says a lot. And kind of what's your thoughts on that when she said, when I was a kid, I lived to die and now I live to live? I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Connie?
I mean, I think that's actually just so powerful. The fact that you've had this journey and clearly there's been a lot of growth and development to get you to a point to see that your life is worth living. Personally, I'm just thinking about, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and so I think about, so here's someone who, you've gone through this journey, but along the way, you've learned so much. One of the things I think about, especially like with this channel, we really try to use a platform to educate people. And so I'm just thinking, as a random parent who may not, now working in corrections, I have a different view of things, right? But I also think, how do I know what to look for, right? Like, I want to protect my kid. How do I identify a recruiter? Like, how do I pick up on those things that are maybe telltale signs that your kid is going left, right? Like, I mean, I don't really know, but I think clearly there might be some things that as parents we might miss out on because maybe we're not too familiar with the life outside, right? So is there something that you could give to parents or the audience to say, like, so this is what a recruiter might look like, this is where they might show up, so that we're kind of aware?
Yeah. So, I mean, recruiters can show up anywhere. I mean, I've definitely learned that through, my situation and also working with, other survivors. Right now with COVID and being, kids are stuck in their houses, online, games, Vive, and you'd be surprised the type of games that they can show up on, even little kids games. Like, I remember when my kids were little, I don't know if they have it anymore, but you'd get the stuffed animal to have a link, you'd link into Webkins, I think it was called. We'd find exploiters in there. So what I tell parents, or even aunts or whatever, Snapchat, things like that, you need to be aware of what your kids are doing online. And it's really hard because it's an easy thing right now to let me put them on the computer, let them play a game on my phone, let them do that, so I can cook dinner, right? Or I can do, but you have to also be aware that you need to be checking on those things. You need to be having those conversations. What's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what information is appropriate to give, what isn't, when they should come to you. And then making sure that you check those things. When I talk to parents, I always, do this thing where, how many of you know your kids, email passwords, their phone passwords, the passwords into their games? How many of you can, your kid will hand you their phone and you can look through their text messages. If you can't do those things, then there's something not right. What's unfortunate is some of these online predators, they will use apps on your kids' phones. They'll tell your kids, download this app that will look like a calculator or a photo app or some like a normal app. You wouldn't even know it, but it's actually a way to hide chats. It's a way to hide text messages. It's a way to hide videos and different things like that. And so then they have them hide that information, but they can still get it to them. And so it's making sure you're going in. Some phones have it where your kids can't add an app until you give them access. And so that gives you the access to actually read about what that app is before you do it. So those are things that you can do to help kind of prevent and protect. Conversation is huge. Unfortunately, recruiters, they're going to look like your kids' friends. You're not going to always know. But you want to pay attention, I feel like, to who are your kids hanging around? Are they hanging around different, or even kids you're working with? Are they hanging around a different crew? Are they older than them? Are they younger than them? Are they dressing any different? Meaning, are they wearing more fancier clothes than they normally do? Or even wearing, kind of been in the same clothes for a few days? For teachers, I tell them, do you notice a kid that's sleeping every time they're in class? But maybe weren't always like that. These are different changes that you're looking for. More quiet than they used to be. Listen to the words that they use, daddy, just there's different words that you can find, and that comes with, training and getting trained. There's people like me, there's other people out there that are training, for whatever specific, whether it be parents or schools. I mean, we have such a hard time getting into schools because this topic is so don't say those words, right? But that's where we need to be, law enforcement, social workers, different things. We do different trainings to try to bring all the different levels of, the resources and the tools that individuals need of how to, look for this, and it comes, unfortunately, it comes in so many different ways, and we think that this only happens to youth that are troubled. But I know youth that they were angry at their parents because they didn't get to go to a camp they wanted to go to one summer, and went on, it was like an art app, where you share your artwork and stuff. And this individual, started talking to them on there, and within 3 weeks was coming up to her state, from a different state to come see her. So that's the thing that we have to be careful, because most parents would think, oh, that's just an art app where you share your art. They wouldn't have thought, that somebody's contacting her on there. And so that's, and her dad was in law enforcement. He was a border patrol. And so we have to be careful about, all of those things, are not just thinking, oh, it's not going to happen to my kid because we come from a good home, or, so I hope that answers it. There's so much I could tell you. I'd take up, 3 hours of the thing.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, there's, I used to read a lot of Gavin DeBecker books. He does a book called Gift of Fear, but he also has a book related to, safety for the children. I started reading those books when I had my first daughter, Mia. And, again, you have to monitor. It doesn't stop. But also you can't, like you mentioned, you can't be afraid to have the dialogue, too. You can't be afraid to, as long as you balance it, to tell them about the ugly in the world. But then again, obviously, there's a way that you can have that approach, because I do want my kids to trust me enough to know that they're not going to get in trouble. And even if, I work in corrections, everything's universal precaution. No matter how problematic my daughter may be, even as getting older, I'm always going to listen to her. I'm always going to believe what she tells me. She'll know that even if she's telling me a story, maybe eventually she'll realize, not to lie to daddy. But the thing is, I will never shut her down, because the moment I do, I've made her a target. Because, a lot of these predators, they pick high levels of trust positions. So, it won't be a priest because, and then also they put them in positions where we question ourselves, where, well, I let them talk to that priest. There's no way that's true, and it's a very wicked mind game. But in the end, a lot of how you alleviate that is, troubled child or not, they could be targets. Listen to what they have to say and let them know that you're listening, because the moment you stop listening is the moment they stop telling you.
Right.
Hey, Monica, do you have anything you would like to say in closing before we wrap up?
Just thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it. I feel like, this week has kind of been a whirlwind of sharing. I don't usually share my story twice in 1 week, but I definitely have felt like, when you reached out to me, that I was meant to, come on here. And I definitely feel like this is a week of healing for me. And I've felt, there's things I've talked about with you guys that I haven't gotten in depth in. And it felt good for me to, sometimes tears are a way of healing, I've learned. And so I just want to thank you both for, making me feel welcome. And, I hope this helps, somebody know that they're not alone, or also to just treat victims differently. That's a huge thing for me. Is I hate the word prostitute. I hate the word, pimp in the good sense, where, so just changing our terminology and treating each other with respect and listening, that can change worlds.
Again, this was a great dialogue. We have a lot of people that are correctional staff that have kids. So, there's value into what was being said, what was being shared. And obviously, this episode was really about listening and then trying to understand what questions we felt needed to be asked. And a lot of it really is the end result of where you were to where you are, and then, building something new technically, but something you deserve, which is a life that has value and makes you completely happy. Connie, what's your closing thoughts on today's dialogue? 2 tough ones in a row, Connie.
I know. You've been trying to exhaust me.
It's what I do.
First, I just want to say thank you to Monica for just being so vulnerable with us, allowing us to ask you questions and to kind of poke at things a little bit, just so that we understand your story. And, for those listening, many times, like, people tell this story and they have questions and they don't have an opportunity to ask those questions. So we try to think of things that the audience may want to know more about, like, could you expand on something or such? So just thank you so much for being so vulnerable. And I think to the audience, I would just like to say, just understand that, sex trafficking isn't like just some random thing. It's not something that's not happening. I think the last statistic I saw is like there were at least 4 million girls and women who were being trafficked in the United States. And so, try not to take things for granted. You've got daughters, you've got a very vulnerable population out there. We don't like to talk about our foster care system and those systems where children are running away and becoming more vulnerable to the predators that are out there. So please, if not for nothing, just be aware that this is happening. And if there is a time and space where you can be of help, please try to help.
Yeah, as far as we come to a close, Connie mentioned it before about how we try to share videos that have information and value. And once in a while, sometimes the topics aren't so much for the audience as it is for ourselves. As we sat there and we learned the story that was being told, right? And therefore we opened ourselves to a world we know very little about, but we feel really needs to have some light shined on it. Guys, there's recruitment happening in the prisons all the time. It's happening, and the funny thing is that, yes, female inmates could still go in as victims, even though they committed a crime, and they can leave and become victims, or they can become victims when they leave. The thing is that we need to be aware, because we could play a very important role behind that wall in identifying that, that we can have value in that, whether you're an officer, whether you're a social worker, civilian staff member, whatever the case is. We could have a tremendous impact that could stop a lot of that game, because there's recruiters everywhere. And then I was watching a video recently where there's people looking up what these females do before they get arrested. And then there's an inmate that's in there saying, I wonder if they got a place to go, and I got you. And then it leads into the world that we just talked about today. So just giving you a better understanding, but also maybe where you could play into this, you know, where you can do something as professionals in the system that we work in. But again, thank you for sharing the story, Monica. You know, again, I chose to be, this is a story of, you know, we talked about being positive versus optimistic. You know, this is a story of really, you know, turning your life around, finding value through something that most people just gave in. Even as I said, you went through those battles. And then also in some unique way, building a stronger bond with your mother. You know, I mean, I'm sure you guys may have a troubled past, but I'll tell you something, your troubled past just reinforced the bond that came later, because your mother was there. Throughout the whole story, you know, your mother pops up a lot. She pops up a lot. So even though she may have her own demons, you're lucky to have a mother who, while she's fighting what she has to fight, she never once forgot to not fight for you. You know, she fought for you, you know, and I thought that was something worth noting in the story as well. And as always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, don't forget, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit the bell. Bell will notify you every time I post a video. And guys, don't forget, check out the podcast Connie has. Also check out the Tear Talk podcast. And other than that, stay safe. And please listen to the story that was told today. The story had a lot of vulnerability, but it's meant to serve a purpose. It's meant to have value. Take it in. And even if you don't think it's for you, share it to someone else who it may be for. You know, a lot of people realize that the stuff we share, don't be so selfish. Share it. All right, guys, as always, take care. Stay safe.